Greetings, family. Welcome to the African Exodus show, more specifically, the Conspiracy to Erase a Nation segment. In this particular segment, we delve into the topic of the real Yasharel. Where did the real kingdom of Israel that is spoken about in the Bible exist? And we discuss the fact that it was not inside of Palestine as is commonly prescribed, but actually located in East Africa. This is all around a book that I wrote in the beginning of this year, Conspiracy to Erase a Nation. The book is available on Amazon. If you'd like a very short version of the book, a mini book, it is available on my Telegram channel. If you look in the link in the description, you will see Telegram. You click that link and it will take you right to the channel. You can download the PDF from the top of the page. Today's topic is a very important one because we're going to deal with one of the major barriers that people face as far as believing. Me and other people who have said on this platform and written books even about this subject, people who have said that the real Yasharel, the real kingdom spoken about in the Bible, was based inside of East Africa. One of the common pushbacks that I've received is that, well, if that's the case, then what about the Romans? There's no historical record of the Romans ruling inside of East Africa. And we know that inside of the Bible, it is spoken about that the Romans essentially colonized Yasharel. We're going to deal with that, and we're going to deal with it in a way that is probably more unconventional because we're going to deal with possibilities instead of sureties. Because realistically, the historical record is so sparse on this particular question that we really have to just be open to what is in the word, what is said, and what is not said. So that's what I encourage you to do. Look at this from all areas, from all angles, and be ready to deal with this tough topic because this deals with whether or not we can trust the Bible. When we read about the location of Yasharel that cannot be Palestine, we have to make a decision. Is the Bible true or is the Bible not true? If the Bible is true, then we have to take it at its word that the place, the land where Yasharel existed, that is between the river that has been commonly called the Euphrates River, but really is the Parath River, which would have been the Blue Nile, as we discussed previously, and also between the Red Sea. That was the location where Yasharel existed. So I encourage you to go back at previous lectures if you're not convinced of this, particularly the first lecture I did, 100% proof that Israel was in Africa. Do not deal with the topics that I deal with there unless you actually watch the whole video in the full version. I put the link on that video inside of the pinned comment, and that will take you over to Rumble. So back to what I was saying though, this is a big barrier for people because we know about the Roman presence inside of Israel. It's really a Romanized story if you think about it. All of us have these depictions that we have been fed for a long time of seeing Yahusha, or Jesus to some of you, being crucified inside of a Roman colony. We have the pictures of Roman soldiers everywhere. And this is not something that is known to have reflected what we know of in East Africa. So first we're going to deal with two different possibilities as far as could the Romans have actually occupied East Africa in a way that maybe might have escaped the historical record, because this is just a region that was not reported upon as heavily and as detailed as other regions of the world. So we're going to deal with that question first. Is there a possibility that Rome did exist in East Africa, that Rome was ruling in East Africa, but again, it just escaped the historical record or has been purposely hidden from the historical record, has been stored away, and many people are just unaware because, again, we only know his story, whoever's story is empowered to tell us what did happen or did not happen. So first, we're going to deal with that big question. Did Rome occupy East Africa and it just escaped our notice because history, again, is told by those who are in power and want us to know their narratives? So first, let's focus on where it could have occupied Africa. There's two directions from which the Roman Empire could have occupied East Africa. The first, obviously, from Egypt. We know Egypt became colonized by Rome, and it just so happens that around the same time period where the Romans occupied Egypt and began pushing into Kush, that their presence was actually in East Africa, really close to the time that Yahushua would have been born. The other direction, which we will also talk about, is Rome could have occupied Axum, the Ethiopia area, from the place that we know of as the Gulf of Aden, or today what would be known as the Yemen area, basically the area near Djibouti. Now, there is a well-documented presence of the Romans inside of East Africa during the reign of the Kushite queen Amenernas of Kush, who ruled from 25 to 21 BCE. And Kush had ongoing conflicts with the Romans during this period because they were trying to occupy Kush so that they could have a way to basically be able to reach that area inside of East Africa that we know of as the Gulf of Aden or Yemen. They wanted control over that because that would have bolstered their power. So literally there was fighting going on between Kush and the Romans during this time. And again, as we said, between 25 to 21 BCE, that would have been very close to the time that Yahusha would have been born. And we also know, obviously, that that would have been during the time that the Judean or the Yahudim resettled inside of East Africa. From 21 to 29 BCE, there was actually a peace treaty that was signed between Kush and Egypt. And at that point, the fighting stopped. However, the Roman Empire still obviously occupied this area because we know that Egypt remained a colony of the Romans. So once this happened, once they essentially were pushed back by this Kushite queen, the Romans decided to try to occupy that area of the Gulf of Aden or Yemen. They tried to do it the other way that we spoke about, and that is by coming down the Arabian Peninsula and essentially capturing this area known today as Yemen. They were actually partially successful in occupying this area of the Arabian Peninsula. Particularly, they were able to occupy an area inside of the Gulf of Aden. They actually renamed this area Arabia Felix, and this became a Roman proxy inside of this area. But again, they wanted more territory. They wanted to establish dominion of the Roman Empire inside of the Arabian Peninsula. So between 26 and 24 BCE, you had the Romans launch another military campaign, again with the agenda of occupying this Arabian area. However, this one also failed under Gaius Aelius Gallus. Something that was interesting about this expedition is that the Romans teamed up with a group known as the Nabateans. Nabateans occupied that area that we spoke about previously called Man. Man is where Timan would have occupied. Timan, as we talked about previously, is an Edomite enclave. Timan is one of the descendants of the Edomites. So interestingly enough, an area that is affiliated with the Edomites had teamed up with Rome in order to occupy this area. We can only speculate why. But as I said, the expedition was not successful. In fact, the Romans were propelled back. Their troops were facing things like starvation. They weren't able to get supplies to their troops quick enough. And essentially, the Arabians were able to push the Romans back, and the entire expedition was abandoned. Other than this, I was able to find some clashes that did happen between the Romans and the Arabs during 1 BCE. But again, this is not something that's well documented or something that history has preserved well for us. So essentially, that is the totality of what at least I was able to uncover about Roman garrisons that have been recorded to have been in this area of East Africa from the Arabian Peninsula and also from up north in Egypt. Now, of course, we can speculate. It's very possible that the Romans actually occupied more of this area, but because the historical record has been wiped clean as far as Axum's beginnings, and Axum's beginnings are very mysterious. No one really knows how it began. No one really knows who was the first ruler of Axum. So it's completely plausible that this was known at one point, but completely wiped off the historical record. And so now we just don't have the evidence to be able to prove what the Bible has already attested to, that East Africa was the true land of Yasharel. That's the first possibility. We're going to deal with another possibility. So as I said, this next option is going to be a lot more contentious for some of you because some of us take every single word in the Bible to be inerrant, meaning there's no errors inside of the Bible. No one has mistranslated anything over the years and years of the papacy controlling who was going to translate the Bible, over the years and years of the rabbinical Judaism that we know was antagonistic to Yahusha, having a great deal of pull as far as what the canon would be. Still, some people are openly willing to concede that, hey, these people who we don't trust control the distribution of the Bible, control the translation of the Bible, but we're still going to call it an inerrant document. That topic in and of itself is something that we will deal with separately. But I want to give you a possibility. And again, just be willing to consider the possibilities. If the Bible has been translated, specifically mistranslated in the area of locations, where certain places were, what the geography of Yasharel was, if the names have been changed, is it possible that the empire could have been changed? Is it possible that the empire that we know of as the Roman Empire, which we know to have conquered Yasharel, is it possible that this was all a fabrication in order to cover up the real land of Yasharel? So how do we know this to be true or not true? Well, first thing we want to look at is the Bible. What does it actually say about the Roman presence inside of Yasharel? You should note that most of what we know about the Roman presence inside of Yasharel, or much of what we think we know, comes directly from factions that we would identify today as Pharisees. So we'll talk on another video about Josephus. He's not who many of you probably think he is. But outside of Josephus, we also know that there was a number of different actors who compiled things like the Book of Maccabees along with Josephus. And all of these people had an incentive to cover up where the real Yasharel was, because they were trying to pass a proxy of the Roman Empire as being the true Holy Land. And this, of course, put the religion of Judaism right in control of the Romans, and they saw their destiny as being linked inside of Palestine, not one that they wanted to attach to East Africa. Well, with no further ado, let's go to the scriptures. So start with Mark 12 through 17. This is a common one where we think about the Roman presence inside of the Bible. It says, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to him in order to trap him in a statement. They came and said to him, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and do not care what anyone thinks, for you are not partial to anyone, but you teach the way of Yahuwah in truth. Is it permissible to pay a poll tax to Caesar or not? Are we to pay or not pay? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said to them, Why are you testing me? Bring me a denarius to look at it. And he brought one, and he said to them, Whose image and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. Yahusha said to them, Pay to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to Yahuwah the things that are Yahuwah's. And they were utterly amazed at him. So let's just look at this example. Yahusha says, Bring me a denarius, is what is said or translated. So he brings them, he's brought a coin, and the coin he says, Whose inscription is this? And he said, Caesar's. He said, Pay to Caesar as you would to Caesar. This is his money. Give him what he wants, right? As far as his own currency. Now, here's the thing about that. Caesar is not actually a name like many of us think it is. Caesar is actually a title. If you look at the Greek translation of Caesar, which is Caesar, Caesar literally means emperor. So if you're translating the Bible from, and as I said previously, I believe that the New Testament was originally in Hebrew for the most part, probably except for the book of Luke, but definitely the books of Matthew and the books of Mark. And these books were translated again into Greek. If you're trying to hide the location of the true Yasharel and you see the word emperor or king, you could easily translate that as Caesar using the Greek connotation or the Greek translation. But let's look at another example. Okay, so this one is what makes the Gospel of Luke very different, because it actually talks about a census that supposedly happens inside of Yasharel. So Luke 2:1-7 states, Now in those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken all over the inhabited earth. This was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all the people were on their way to register for the census, each to his own city. Now Joseph also went up from Galilee and from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of the family of David, in order to register along with Mary, who was betrothed to him and was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, before I give you some different possible ways that you can look at this scripture, it's important to note that this has been a scripture that biblical scholars have struggled with, at least the ones who are not apologists and just try to come up with different excuses for why they can't prove the historicity of a particular passage. The reason is because this census that is recorded in the book of Luke really does not bear any historical bearing, because number one, the Romans did not take a census, at least as far as the historical record. The historical record says that the Romans did not take a census at this time. Also, in addition, it's not recorded ever that the Romans would have required for Joseph to go back to the city where he was born in. The other part of it is that the person who was the governor of Judea was not the person who was the governor of Galilee. So again, that kind of messes with the historicity of that particular scripture. Now, there's some ways you can think about it. I mean, there's still with the possibility that it's true. The census just was never recorded. The Romans did something out of the norm whenever they put out this decree. It was never recorded, again, as we said, and outside of the Bible. Okay, that is possible. We're dealing with possibilities in this video, sure. The other possibility, as I bring up in the book, is that Luke, who says inside of the gospel, in fact, let's read it. He says inside of the gospel and opens it up and says, since many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they have handed down to us those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting to me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in an orderly sequence, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. What does Luke say here that makes his account different than the other gospels? Well, he tells us up front, this is not an eyewitness account. Essentially, he has compiled different accounts of people who are trusted, but he has compiled different accounts. And this is not something that he can personally attest to. We also see he's writing this to someone named Theophilus, and who we assume is a Roman, right? The thing about this that people have considered is the possibility that one of the references for Luke's gospel could have been Josephus, because Josephus actually does attest to a similar census that sort of matches this historical record, and that it's possible that Luke could have instead have been referring to Josephus, and Josephus at the time was passing himself off to be a Hebrew. As I said, and I will deal with later with Josephus, he was not really a Hebrew. So that's another possibility. He could have been referencing Josephus, and that's the reason essentially why he was not able to accurately record the beginnings as far as what happened with Yeshua. That's another possibility that I pose. Here's another possibility. As I said in the beginning, everything could have been mistranslated. What if the census was not done by Rome? What if the census was done by another power that occupied Yasharel? What if the emperor was not the emperor of Rome, but was actually the emperor of another empire? How would that have a different bearing if essentially this was mistranslated, as I have laid out inside of this book, as I have alleged, that a lot of the locations and even some figures were mistranslated in the Bible. So this is what I would actually say is my believed, or the theory that I favor of the other ones, is that in fact everything has been mistranslated in order to hide the real location of Yasharel. And my theory in that is that the people who actually occupied Yasharel, the people who colonized Yasharel, the empire that we know of and we have thought of as the Romans, we have the Romans in our mind constantly. It was not the Romans, it was actually the Sabeans. So why do I say that the Sabeans actually could have been the ones to have been the occupying power over Yasharel instead of the Romans? Well, first thing I want you to know, again, if you actually go through the different references to the Romans, they're not that strong as far as a direct reference to the Roman Empire inside of the New Testament, outside of the letters of Paul. And that's obviously Paul was actually a Roman citizen. But if you look at the Gospels, the references to the Romans are very sparse. The other thing, though, is that you should understand is that the Roman record as far as Yahusha is very sparse. So let's look through some passages from the book Conspiracy to Erase a Nation. So one thing I wrote about is that the earliest account of Yahusha that is not in the Bible was by Thallus. He was a Roman historian who around 50 CE is reported to have written about Yahusha's death. Not much is known about Thallus, including where or when he wrote this account, as the account itself is no longer in existence. Julius Africanus, a Libyan who lived from 160 to 240 CE, is the closest reference we have to Thallus's commentary. Other Roman references were a considerable time after the resurrection and thus could not have been the first-hand accounts. Thus, outside of the biblical text, first-hand information on Yahusha is non-existent. Now, this is something that is very much not emphasized by different biblical scholars. The Roman documentation or the Roman account of Yahusha outside of the Bible is very sparse. And so we have to question if even Thallus himself, his account would not have come until 50 CE, which again, if we're going by the timeline that we've been given, Yahusha would have been crucified somewhere around 20 years before he even gave this account. That's the earliest we have as far as a Roman account about Yahusha. So that's not very bearing on this idea that this happened inside of a Roman territory and that the Romans have this bearing presence inside of the New Testament. So why could it be the Sabeans? Well, again, if we look at the geography, and again, go to the previous videos before you try to argue that the geography does match. If you look at the geography, Palestine does not match the biblical Yasharel. It just does not. And I believe the biblical Yasharel is what Yahuwah said it was, what his prophets said it was, what the people who have recorded the message said it was. Because of that, I cannot believe it is Palestine. But if I know Yahusha is the Messiah, then I also know that that could not have happened inside of Palestine. It had to happen in East Africa. That's just my train of thought why I arrived at this conclusion. But if you actually look at the presence of the Sabeans in East Africa, they occupied a very similar presence as how we think Rome would have occupied the kingdom of Yasharel. Very similar. In fact, they were essentially colonizing East Africa, and that's something that most people are not aware of. So let's just talk about this. So the Sabean Empire, that would be modern day Yemen as far as the base from where it arises. It was a great empire. It was influential, particularly with the spice trade. It controlled a lot of the spice trade going from Egypt and also to the Arabian Peninsula, and until literally the Egyptians cut them out of the spice trade. They were the main people, the middlemen, as far as trading spices to and fro from the Egypt to the Arabian Peninsula. Saba really continued to be a powerful empire until 275 CE. Throughout this time, they were heavily present in Ethiopia. They were a strong presence in Ethiopia. And even before the establishment of Aksum, so even before the Yahudim would have gone into exile, before the kingdom of Yasharel went into exile, the Sabeans were there. They were present. It's also very interesting that some people have speculated that the Sabeans might have even founded Aksum. There's also evidence that the Sabean language was actually spoken inside of Aksum or spoken inside of Ethiopia, so they would have given their language to the region. So you see the colonizing presence. Not only that, the architecture of the Sabeans was present inside of Yasharel. Some of you might be familiar with the Yeha temple. That is Sabean architecture. So we're going to go to the scriptures, 2 Kings 17 through 24. It says, "Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Kutha, Ava, Hamath, Sepharvaim, and settled them in the cities of Samaria in place of the sons of Yasharel. So they took possession of Samaria and lived in its cities." So this is very interesting because this would have been during the captivity when Yasharel was sent to Assur. Now, I'm going to mess with some of your minds a little bit on this, but just bear with me. We've been conditioned to think that Assur in the Bible, that's the direct Hebrew translation of what we know of as Assyria. We've been conditioned to think that Assur was actually Assyria. However, Jubilees attest to Assur, so does Genesis attest to Assur, and it does not necessarily match Assyria. And Assur, at least from what I was able to map out from Jubilees and also the biblical account, is that Assur would have actually been located inside of the Arabian Peninsula. So if Assur was actually the kingdom that Yasharel went into captivity inside, then that means that the Arabians were literally the ones who were the dominating force over Yasharel. This is important because we also know who was present inside of Arabia at the same time. We know that the Edomites were present in Arabia, as I showed previously. Scripture shows that the Edomites went into Arabia whenever their kingdom was destroyed. And we also see that Assur was the kingdom where the Yasharelites were put into captivity. And as we see inside of the scripture, during this captivity, Assur literally moved different people into the kingdom of Yasharel to basically occupy space. We've called this place Samaria, right? So going back to my book, Conspiracy to Erase the Nation, Sabeans began migrating from the area surrounding their capital, Marib, into the modern-day Eritrea and Tigray region of northern Ethiopia. They brought their South Arabian culture and technology, creating a cultural landscape known as Ethio-Sabian, which extends to areas along the trade routes from Adulis to Tigrayan highlands. Aspects of the South Arabian culture in Ethiopia are apparent in architecture, epigraphic documents written in the ancient South Arabian alphabet, and also the form of religion and rule. So let's be clear, this area that we have shown is Yasharel according to the biblical coordinates, according to where the river is, where the sea is. This is the area that Yasharel was ruled by the kingdom of Saba. And if we're going to draw a semblance to what we see in the New Testament, this presence is literally what we would have seen as the Roman presence inside of Yasharel. So what that means is essentially there's a strong possibility that when the original people wrote the Gospels that we know of as Mark, Matthew, and the Gospel of John is another possibility that was originally written in Hebrew. When they wrote these Gospels, it's very strong possibility that the translators basically changed the coordinates of the land, also changed the people who ruled the land and the empires that ruled the land from one that was East African to one that would be Palestinian and based inside of Rome. Now we can deal with the different reasons why this would have happened. I mean, obviously the obvious one is that the Romans wanted control over any type of religious authority that was going to be inside of their domain. And obviously they were not going to have a Yasharel that was not inside of the Roman Empire, because if you know anything about that period when the Romans took control of Christianity, you know that Axum was not subject to Rome. So imagine them adopting the religion of Christianity, knowing that the real Yasharel was in East Africa, and basically saying we're going to adopt a religion that the chosen people and the chosen land is outside of Roman territory. That would not have gone well for the Romans. Also, we know why the people who would become the Jewish people would essentially be okay with this, because whenever you read the biblical narrative, you see that as far as what was intended for Yasharel, that Yasharel would become under their vestige or under their influence. Essentially, they would be the dominating force inside of that kingdom. We know that's not what happened as far as the biblical narrative. We know that Yahusha comes and upsets the Pharisaic order, meaning the Holy Land that they wanted would not be able to be established inside of the real Yasharel. So they had to create another Yasharel. So we'll get more into like what happened and who the real Pharisees were. But I wanted to just give you these possibilities. As I said, I mean, that's the one that I lean towards, but this is something where the historical record is not plentiful, just based on what we read in the Bible and what we see as the reality on the land inside of East Africa. That's why I lean towards this as the most likely possibility. But I'm also still open to the one that I'm wrong, and maybe the Romans actually were able to have a real presence inside of East Africa during this time, because we know that they were present militarily. So maybe they could have had a presence inside of Axum that was not recorded by history because it could have been wiped out. A lot of possibilities. Definitely want to hear your thoughts on this video. We will continue next time. I think we're going to talk about who the real Pharisees were inside of Axum. Who were the people who were basically antagonistic towards Yahusha and who wanted to subject him and the Yasharelites to their rule? Who are those people? The Edomites that we've spoken about many times. So we'll get into that in the next video. But with that, I thank you all for watching, and y'all willing, I'll see you in the next video.